the Baen Free Radio Hour.
On the podcast, deals on Esther Friesner ebooks, and we continue our ongoing audiobook serialization of Timothy Zahn's Cobra. All right now. Welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour. It's a pleasure to have you along. I am Baen Associate Editor and your podcast host, David Afsharirad. This week, we bring you part 2 of our roundtable discussion on the new Worlds of Honor anthology, What Price Victory, led by Sean Patrick Hazlett, who was joined by David Weber, Jane Lindskold, Joelle Presby, Jan Kotouč, and Thomas Pope. But first, the news. Here at Baen, we love ebooks, and we know you do too. So to celebrate the release of Chicks in Tank Tops, edited by Jason Cordova, we're offering discounts on the classic anthologies edited by Esther Friesner that started it all. For the month of January, it's the Esther Friesner Anthology ebook sale. We will offer $1 off the Chicks in Chainmail series, and as a bonus, we're also discounting the anthologies in Friesner's Supernatural Suburbia series. Discounts are good through the end of the month and apply wherever Baen ebooks are sold. And that's it for the news.
Jan, when you were writing this story, there's obviously a tremendous and voluminous body of work that just for the the Honorverse and that you have to have knowledge about. How did that process work with David, with Tom, with everybody involved in terms of making sure that you got a timeline that was consistent? There were no anachronisms. There were you didn't contradict things that were in the past, because especially with the fan base that you have, David, right? Somebody will find any inconsistencies and they will let you know.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So you get this assignment, Jan. It's no pressure. How did that work from kind of the tactics of that?
I think it worked well. I still cherish the little note that Tom left in the book that all the ship names appear to be very consistent with the types of like what ship class is named after and sort of. And he said, so you probably know your stuff, or I happened to send you the ship list and I forgot about it. So it was the second option, yeah. So, and I remember that the super dreadnought that the renegade Heavenite officer commands is named Scimitar in the book, and there was like first note like that's not a name for the Heavenite ship of the line, and then in the second half of the story someone mentions, well, the villain renamed the ship to Scimitar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I've spent a lot of time too working through these things with the anthology books, and even sometimes in David's writing. I mean, David is, it will surprise everyone to hear, not perfect. I know that this is amazing, but occasionally there will be a mix-up, and so I work really hard to figure out how to make that true, because I'd rather not retcon things that I don't have to. So.
And has anything ever slipped?
Oh yeah.
Oh, never. Oh yeah. Well, okay. Two things that one of them came to light a long time ago, which was that I dropped a decimal point or two when I originally calculated the density for the ships in the Honorverse, which is why they were as long as they were in the original stories, and why you haven't seen any real references to their length or anything since, because Tom and I were like,
resizing of which we shall not speak.
Yes, because they would have had the density of styrofoam, to be that size and that tonnage, and it was more important that they have the tonnage because of the way I'd set up the technology than that they have the physical dimension. So we had to go one way or the other. The other one is that there is an editing error, a typo error in Field of Dishonor. which is that the duel that Honor fights with Somervale at 40 meters is at 20 meters, not 40 meters, the way that the story says that it is. Okay, and that's my fault because I decided I was going to change how that duel was fought. It started, they were going to fire first at 40 meters and then move closer and then move closer. And I decided that I wanted Honor to take him down the way that she did. And 40 meters is half a football field. Okay. So I changed it in my head and in the way that I wrote the scene, but the 40 meters never got changed. So I'm actually revisiting that in a current book. And I'm going to have an author's note that says, guys, I know this is not, but this is the way it was supposed to be the first time around. Tom has saved me from quite a few things like that over the years.
And missed some too.
Yeah, well, okay, but I mean, that's on me where they got missed. The problem is, Poul Anderson once said, perfect consistency is possible only for the Almighty, and a careful reading of Scripture will suggest that even he dropped a stitch or two along the way. That's not exactly the way that Poul put it, but that's what he was talking about. And when you have a literary universe that extends over as many novels and short stories as the Honorverse does, there are going to be continuity errors. There are going to be consistency errors. You just can't avoid it. And I think overall, we've done a remarkably good job in the Honorverse of holding those to a minimum. And a lot of credit for that goes to Bu9 and to Tom in particular. I've gotten to the point where I just routinely go, as a matter of fact, I was consulting the Bu9 radio files just yesterday while I was working away here, Tom, on ship names and when the noblesse class became available, because I needed that for where I was in the story. Well, I have that now. I have when that class of destroyers was laid down, when the last unit was laid down, and I can go and I can check and be sure that I stay consistent.
I want to put in a small thing, which is that every so often I will just throw in a placeholder name. Like in one of the stories, I named a bunch of small ships after my cats, and Weber decided he liked that. So there are now a bunch of Honorverse ships named after, they have very strange names because they're the names of my cats.
The Kwahi class.
But I had just, the Kwahi class, etc. Kwahi was a very nice cat. And that's, Kwahi is actually a form of Pueblo pottery, black and white pottery. But it is fun working in the universe because I'll toss something in and say, change it to fit your need. I just needed to call it something other than ship A, or I would get, it wouldn't seem real to me. And then every so often, his sense of whimsy. We can't leave out the fact that I think one of the things that makes the Honorverse so cool is the sense of whimsy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I get, it's just like Robespierre. I mean, I couldn't help myself there, Now, I will confess, I was working just as hard as I could to keep everybody looking at the French Revolution because I intended all along to go somewhere else entirely.
Mm-hmm.
So I was shameless, the tennis court of the Committee for Public Safety. I mean, okay, yeah, sure. Obviously, this is going to be the French Revolution, right? Wait, he just blew up Napoleon. I mean, that was what I had in mind all along. I don't know why people think I'm devious. I have no idea, but yeah.
Speaking of the how we managed to not go far off, I remember one discussion. It was not about hardware stuff, but more about personal stuff, because one of the characters is a spook. He works for the Office of Naval Intelligence, and his cover is that he behaves like a jerk. And he seems like he's been in the role for so long that he's become the role. And we've had discussions with David, how it works in the Royal Manticore Navy, how much he can get away with, because even Earth military organizations differ in these things a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So like, what's the proper, like for Honorverse about like talking back to your CO, or not even his CO, just a superior officer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what we did was he gets the hammer falls on him earlier than expected, and then he has to say who and what he is. You know?
He has to fess up a lot earlier than he planned on.
Now, Jan, for readers who are looking to get this anthology, how would you describe your story? So if you had to kind of like a 3-sentence pitch, how would you describe it? What would they take away from it?
I'll say the macro story is adventure in Silesia, in the I hope in the tradition of honor among enemies, and the micro story is dealing with loss and just learning to keep on and realizing that the pain is not going away. It's just you learn to live with it, which happened to many of us in different circumstances in our life. It doesn't even have to be so extreme as what happened to Eve.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned at the beginning of this interview, or at some point in this interview, that your background in Czech and growing up in Eastern Europe informed the development or the kind of the world building in Silesia. To say a little bit more about that, I'm intrigued by that notion. Like, what aspects, without, because I don't want to generalize, but I'm more than happy to allow you to generalize.
Yeah, I did it because we Czechs like to make fun of ourselves, and I would say first that Czech Republic is actually not Eastern Europe; it's Central Europe. Prague is more west than Vienna is, but I understand it as a country of former Eastern Bloc, and of course, for those viewers who don't know, Silesia is actually part of both Czech Republic and Poland. It's like a historical region that's now divided into these two countries. And so when Czechs, and I assume Poles as well, read Honorverse for the first time, they were like, wow, there's a Silesian Confederation and it's very corrupt. Wow.
How could this be?
Of course, like there is corruption in every system. There is probably more political corruption in Czech Republic than in some Western countries, probably. And the more east you go, the more corruption there is. And it was just a few days ago, I've been talking about this with my Ukrainian guests. For those of you who don't know, I have several Ukrainian refugees in my house since March. And we've been toasting to New Year's, and we've been talking about corruption, and the father of the family said, well, the problem is that we have lots of corruption there, and we hope that after the war the corruption would no longer be there. And I said, well, in Czech Republic we also have corruption. And he said, and I thought, yeah, but in Czech Republic it's like this, and in Ukraine it's like this. So, and of course in Russia it's even more like that. So the general rule of thumb is the more east you go, the more corruption there is, unless you go too east and then you are in Alaska, and you probably know better than me about the corruption in Alaska. So.
Well, the Russians did own Alaska for quite some time, until like 1867 or.
Well, I think a lot of the corruption in the Honorverse, whether you're in Silesia or somewhere else, is oligarchical in nature. We have our own versions of corruption in Western societies. The fact that we have a greater tradition of openness and exposing them to sunlight helps, but they've always been there. They will always be there. In any human society, there are people who are going to be in a position to game the rules to get an unfair advantage over other people. One of the things that's important to me in the books is that I don't define characters in terms of victimology. They may find themselves in these situations where they're dealing with overt corruption. They may be victims of the corruption, but they don't see themselves as, they're not putting the responsibility for the bad things happening in their lives off on other people, if you follow what I'm saying, or if they do, they're fighting back. And I think that Silesia, I deliberately structured Silesia to be a bone of contention between my Prussian Chinese and the well, okay, what a bunch of folks from the US and Ukraine in the 23rd century thought England had been like when they were setting it up. And that's one reason why I named the region what I named it. And then there was a sort of inertia in the name that drew it more and more along a certain trajectory in the development of the stories. But yeah, I think Jan has a very valid point about why Silesia seems to have resonated with a lot of my readers from Central and Eastern Europe. I've gotten a lot of correspondence from them over the years about that.
And I would add to Sean's question, I think the type of corruption is different because the original circumstances were different. And in the former Eastern Bloc, after the various revolutions, we had the one in 1989, lots of people could get rich really fast by being first. I think the first billionaire in Russia was someone who was just delivering toilet paper to Moscow, and in 1991, and became a billionaire like in a few months. And so, of course, recently, not getting into that, but we had a prime minister who's owned 80% of Czech agriculture because he was one of the first, and he was in a position to buy lots of stuff after the revolution. And with that much like clout, he could buy political power. And I think that's a similar situation that slowly is happening in Silesia.
Yeah.
And also, like, Silesia was originally a confederacy, so it did not have a unified foreign policy or anything resembling that, right?
Yeah. But one of the things that differs between Silesia and the current situation, I mean, there are a lot of things that differ, obviously, in Europe, is that Silesia grew up into its level of corruption. Post the collapse of the Soviet Union and so forth, those who were in a position to control organs of power under the existing system just translated that in a lot of cases into clout in the new system and used it to take over at the top. Okay. In Silesia, it kind of grew from the bottom to reach the same level. But there are definitely resonances between the two. I got a little bit too carried away with where I wanted to go with it in Shadow of Victory. That was a book that I wrote because I wanted to write it, and it was also written post-concussion. So I made a couple of decisions in it that I shouldn't have. One was giving myself an entire planet full of Czechs and an entire planet full of Poles for an English-speaking audience in the same book. It seemed like a really good idea at the time, and now I can tell I've recovered from the concussion because I still like the book, but I understand why people are like, wait, which planet are we on now?
I still haven't listened to the audiobook of that, but I do pity the poor soul who was narrating it.
Oh, yeah. I definitely was not thinking in terms of audiobooks when I did that one.
All right, let's move on to the next story. If Wishes Were Space Cutters. Joelle, very interesting. It's almost like there's a piece of it where it's like, again, I'm going to completely reduce this to something it's not, but it's like there's a piece of social media in space. There's a piece of, I know growing up, you grew up in a missionary family.
Yes.
And there's some elements of that in here, I think.
Yeah.
So how did you come up with this story? What was the inspiration?
So my intent with this story is that it does stand alone. However, this is actually the third short story in a series. My very first professional paid story was Grayson Navy Letters Home, which was on Baen.com. And readers can still get that for free. It's the Baen Free Library 2012. It's the February story. So it's the second story out there. And David Weber and Tom Pope were strongly involved in me having that first professional sale without me actually ever giving it to anyone myself, which was another story. But so in that story, it's about Ensign Cecily Rustin, and she's got a conflict going on with her little sister, Sulia Rustin, that through most of the story, she doesn't know that all of her private letters are being shared to the entire planet and further.
This is how homicides happen, people.
Sulia's definitely the bad guy in that story. And then the sequel story in Worlds of Honor Beginnings is primarily about Ensign Cecily Rustin's roommate, who is Ensign Claire Bedlam Lacroix. And the villain for that story is primarily her cousin, Noah Bedlam, because the situation in Grayson is that there are a lot more women born than men, and the men are in charge of the family, including young men in charge of their older female relatives. And there's just a lot of cultural stuff going on there. And yes, my background helped inform how I built out all these characters. I am a child of a pastor. My parents were missionaries in a country where men having multiple wives was common, and women were having their lives directed a lot by male relatives, more than is at all common in the United States. Also, I'm a US Naval Academy graduate who was a female military officer. And so experiences from that helped inform these young Grayson female officers in most of the Honorverse. It makes no difference if you're male or female or whatever, but in the Grayson Space Navy at this time period, there are few female military service members of any kind. And so those two stories are so in the military side. But now in this story, I got to have so much fun. So I got to take the two villains from those two stories and give them more background for why they didn't really think they were villains. And I do admit that there are a lot of people who are still going to think that Sulia is a villain because she's all kinds of special. He's trying. He's been trying all along.
Yeah, I think special
that he had to be head of household for 8 people at age 13.
Yes. Well, I have to say, I built Grayson initially for several reasons, but one was that my feeling is that feminist science fiction set 1,000 years in the future is dumb. Okay, because, and I've said this so many times. Okay. By the time Honor Harrington comes along, the question of gender, sexual equality is going to have all the burning relevance for the people of Honor's time that Pharaoh's policy towards the Hittites has for us. Okay, one way or the other, it's going to be a done deal. All right, with that much time and effort put into it. Now, I personally, knowing a lot of women, am pretty sure which way this is going to break down in the end, because if it doesn't, they'll all get guns and, kind of thing. But having said that, Grayson does a lot of things for me, but one of the things that it does is it gave me an arena in which Honor could actually do some of that grappling with gender-based issues and so forth that were not going to be part. My view is that the most effective way to advocate for gender equality is to assume that it is a done deal in the universes that you create. Nobody outside Grayson, no one has ever questioned Honor's fitness to command a starship because she happens to be female. Mm-hmm. Okay. And to me, that's like the most remarkable thing is that the dog didn't bark in the night, if you know what I'm saying here, that's where this is. But the other thing was that the Graysons are a really interesting bunch. When I first presented them in Honor of the Queen, everybody hated them. By the midpoint of the book, they're kind of like, well, maybe they're not so bad. At the end of it, it's like, you Graysons go. You know, kind of thing. And I've had a lot of fun with that side of it. Joelle has developed some aspects of it further than I have, because Honor is looking at it from the outside coming in. She's become a Grayson. She understands her Graysons and they understand her, but she wasn't born a Grayson. And so she didn't have to deal with what Noah and Sulia are dealing with here. Okay. The closest I came to that is in my character Abigail Hearns, really. And Abigail is a stadtholder's daughter.
Yeah.
And so she's at the top of society
Entirely
looking down.
different social level.
Yeah, what Joelle has done is she has gone into the lower strata of Grayson in a way that I really haven't done in the honor-centric novels because of where honor operates. And I think it's been incredibly valuable, and I think she's done a really good job with it.
Yeah, I was particularly struck by just the thought process behind the social welfare system. Like which things to go, like how they were using bank accounts to spend as fast as possible. But it wasn't like, it was nuanced in a way that it was all based on incentives. Like, of course you would do it this way because it's the most efficient. Why would you do it any other way? And the change
Just
that
'cause they're
Noah
poor
has.
doesn't mean they're stupid.
Exactly, exactly. And it doesn't mean that they're evil either, that they're on the social welfare system. They're just responding to incentives. And I thought that came across very objectively in terms of how the characters behave. And just another random
But Sulia
question.
thinks they're stupid just because they're poor.
Well, of course,
Which was also fun.
Yeah.
Well, that is raises. So there's another completely random question. What is with this changing the air filters? Like this motif, where did that come from?
If you're on a Navy ship, you have to change air filters a lot or your equipment stops working. And most likely, if you are on a space station that is just being built up, just being constructed, you also need to change filters a lot so that your air stays breathable. And also, so that's the technical answer. The real answer is, story-wise, I needed something that a couple of 17-year-olds could reasonably do, and that a reason why people at this tech level would not already have a system that goes and does it for them. And so it's just that it's new. There are bots that go around and do this, but the programming's not perfect yet because things are being built. But it is a thing that matters and it's important, and they can have all their fights and conflicts, and their Deacon Roundhouse can be using this not made up, actual necessary work as a training tool to try to make these teenagers into something more, while he's also dealing with his own demons and having situations that are active enough to get the cover of this, this anthology. I'm pretty sure that's Deacon Roundhouse right there.
I believe it is.
And I will not tell you whether or not he survives that, because you got to read the story.
Well, and I thought that was also nicely done, where you had people who'd experienced trauma in different ways and how they responded to it, particularly with Deacon Roundhouse. You want to say more about that?
He was largely inspired by 9/11 folks. I was at the United States Naval Academy when 9/11 happened, and socially as a culture, the focus is on the Twin Towers. But when you're in the military at a time when there's not a draft, a lot of families are at service academies who have parents who are active duty officers and working at the Pentagon, which also got attacked, and who are retired military officers now in airplanes, including airplanes that were their parents were hopefully dead before they impacted the towers. But so the trauma of needing to repress what has happened because you have, we think, a war to go fight with, we don't know who, which is kind of how Oyster Bay was at that point. And so the people who survived and were going on and doing their things, but also knowing a lot of people who died, having relatives, all of that. I tried to put that emotion in there and make it believable, and instead of, so there are the real aspects, but you kind of have to tame it down so people will buy it. And
yeah.
I leave it to the reader to say which way it goes for them.
Something that a friend of mine in the military said to me right after 9/11, and I imagine there's probably quite a few people in Ukraine who are feeling this way right now. He said, basically, the reason that we put on the uniform is so that shit like that doesn't happen to the people we love.
Yeah.
And he said, and it happened.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's a lot of what Joelle is getting at here. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier about the costs that are associated with this kind of, it's a life hammering experience. It's not just a life changing experience when you get into something like this. And you survive or you don't. And if you do, you just have to keep going. That's another friend of mine said to me, I get up every morning, I put one foot in front of the other. And that's how I deal with the people that I've lost. And I don't want, the books are not supposed to be downers. Okay, they're supposed to celebrate the human spirit. They're supposed to celebrate the ability to survive and to still be loving, compassionate human beings who care, because I think that's very important also. But the triumph has meaning primarily if you know what you're triumphing over, what you're surviving to get there. And I think that the Deacon is a really good, Eve is a really good example of that. And Stephanie and Carl, in a way, because Carl more than Stephanie are coming out of the plague years, and Carl's the death of the young woman that everybody assumed, including Carl, that eventually he would be marrying right at the end of the plague years. I don't know that I want to do the worst possible thing I can think of to my characters for them to learn from, but I think that in some ways, whoever said life is pain in The Princess Bride, I think Wesley says that to Buttercup. There's some truth to that. The question is, what do you do with the pain? Does the pain rule you, or do you rule the pain? And the Deacon's jury was out on that at the beginning of this story, I think. But anyway, sorry. Like I said, they're not supposed to be doubters, so I'm not going to go any further with that.
Yeah, and I don't want to give away too much, but it's certainly, I mean, I personally would characterize the ending as not a downer. And I think there's definitely lessons learned in the story, and characters change and evolve and become better for the experience.
Oh, they grow. They grow.
Especially since when you're reading at the beginning, you're like, who am I supposed to like here?
Nobody.
and toward the end, you feel a little bit more.
I think you can like Deacon from the beginning.
Well, yeah. But I would say the two characters I'm talking about are Noah and
Celia.
Miss Ruskin. Yeah.
Like, how can they both lose? I want that one.
And Celia, well, Celia's probably the hardest one to like, to be honest. But even at the end, I think there's, again, another story where you show like where an author shows full humanity, right? The good and the bad, right?
Yeah. When Tony Weisskopf was talking about this anthology at LibertyCon, I believe she said that Sulia was one of the characters she's hated most in quite a while.
I don't know. Is that a good thing, or is that I don't know.
The way she said it, it wasn't immediately clear whether she was talking about the character, about me personally. So I had to ask just to make it sure that it was said out loud that she was not hating Joelle Presby.
Of course not. Of course not.
I just wanted that to be heard by the audience.
Just for clarification, that wasn't about me. That was about Celia. Okay. All right. So let's move on to the final story, which I want to make sure I've looked at it like 8 times, but First Victory.
Yeah.
And this is a classic tale of basically every person who's experienced conflict in a family, and it gets quite unhinged is not the right word, but people can be stubborn.
Oh yeah.
I think that's probably an understatement, particularly stubborn people being stubborn. That's kind of the tagline for this one.
Honor comes by her stubbornness naturally. Okay. Yeah, I would say there. Okay. Allison Harrington has always been one of my favorite characters. I've always been, I've loved Allison, and Allison has her blind spots. Allison never really realized how homely Honor thought she felt. Okay. And she never realized that a lot of that was because Honor is half again her mother's height. And her mother is this petite, gorgeous, kind of thing. And here's Honor, the overgrown horse whose adolescence is stretched out for 25 years because of the generation of prolong that she has. It never clicked for Allison. And Honor never told her parents what happened at the academy because she didn't feel that she could discuss it with her mom. Okay. If Allison had known what had happened. Okay. And that it sort of reflects in the opposite direction. Okay. My son Michael and I were having a discussion. Okay. And he left the room and I said, "Come back here, we're not done." And he said, "Why? You don't love me anyway." And I said, "What?" He said, "You don't love me the way you love the girls." And I said, whoa, where is this coming? He says, "You hug them all the time. You never hug me." And I said, "Michael, have you ever seen me rub the girl's hair?" And he said, like, "No." And I said, "That's how my dad hugged his boy children. And I thought you knew that was how I was hugging you." And it had totally gone past him, and I had totally not realized that it was. Okay, now that was a critically important conversation that we had that has been incredibly constructive for both of us. Okay, but that's one of the things that I was looking at here in terms of the situation between Allison and her mother. Okay, and as Jacques says, what was God thinking when he put the 2 most stubborn women in the universe in the same family? Okay, I mean, because God, being me in this instance, did just that. All right. And these are 2 people who love each other dearly and who just wound each other horribly. Okay. And it's complicated by the fact that Allison cannot explain to her mother in a way that her mom would understand the nature of her relationship with Alfred. Okay. Yes, I love him. That she can communicate. But the fact is, and I don't know that I have made this adequately clear in the books, the only reason that neither Alfred nor Allison was ever adopted by a tree cat is that slot is taken in the relationship the 2 of them have. And the fact that they have that relationship is a lot of why Honor has the depth of the link that she has with Nimitz further down the road, because it was reinforced in her. And Raoul's going to be in for a heck of a ride before this is all over with the Tree Cats. But the problem is that her mom cannot understand that Allison genuinely does not want what her mom wants for her, because it is so manifestly what she should want. Okay. And so there's a little bit of the reverse of that with Honor and Allison. And one of the reasons that it never occurs to Allison to think about what Honor's self-image is that she is so involved in helping Honor decide who Honor wants to be, who Honor needs to be. That communication flow is there. Honor has an awesomely secure childhood with the two parents that she has and Nimitz. But it's so secure that it doesn't occur to Allison that there's part of it that might not be. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's because it's the flip of her relationship with her mom. And it's really, Jacques and Carl are like, how do we fix this? And the answer is, you can't. Okay. I mean, it's just, but that's why, despite the fact that Honor is related to one of the first family of Beowulf, in a lot of respects, she grows up thinking of herself as a yeoman's daughter with no connections to the high and mighty anywhere, because her mom is so determined that she's not going to be one of the Beowulf, Benton, Ramirez choose. And yes, people do say Gesundheit to them a lot when they introduce themselves. I just couldn't help myself with Carl doing that with Jan. And that part of Honor's character DNA was always there for me, but I had never developed it for the readers. So this gave me an opportunity, this and Beauty and the Beast in the previous anthology, gave me an opportunity to build out the characters of Alfred and Allison in a way that I hadn't been able to before, because people sometimes miss the fact that the Honorverse novels are not about Honor Harrington. Okay, heresy, I know. But the thing is that Honor is the window into the universe. Honor and the characters around her. And it's what they do living in that universe that matters to the reader. Okay, so I'm not trying to minimize the importance of Honor Harrington or any of the people in her life, but the stories are about this entire universe and the people who live in it, not a single select group of them. That's how I visualize them. Okay. And these characters are the people you care about. They're the window into this greater world kind of thing that I've got going over here on the side. And it's a world that would be meaningless without characters to put on the stage. Okay, in that sense, no matter how good your world building is, it's the platform that the stories happen in. But that's why I'm so delighted to have Tim and Tom and Jane filling in this early point of the Star Kingdom, and why having Joelle helping to build out the Graysons and Jan working with what's going on over here in Silesia. To me, that's more of the same of what I've been doing all along, but with different perspectives, different voices, different takes. And sometimes they illuminate for me aspects of the original concept that I hadn't really realized were there or dwelt upon. Okay. I remember I had somebody come up to me at a con and explain to me why I'd done something in a book. And he was totally out to lunch, except that I realized when he was done that he nailed it, because it was an inevitable outcome of the way I'd built the character and the situation that I'd put them in, but it wasn't the reason that I had thought it was happening in the story. Okay, I had looked at it as I'm building this macro event going down, and he was looking at it as the macro event was the result of the micro events going on inside the characters. And from the writing process, he was actually more correct than I was. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And these anthologies let me do that on an even greater scale by getting these additional viewpoints, these additional voices in. And it's always fascinating to me to watch the ripples. Okay. Especially since, as I say, I do my best to incorporate the things that happen into the anthologies, into the canon as we go along. For the very first anthology, there's 2 stories that never got incorporated into canon. One was David Drake's, and one was Roland Green's, because the technology and so forth that they had visualized was not really where the Honorverse was going, kind of thing, if you follow what I'm saying. But everything else has pretty much been fitted into the mosaic, and I think has enriched it in the process, which is sort of straying a little afield from First Victory. I will say this: the only thing that I will say, because obviously everybody knows that Allison and her mom got reconciled down the road. Okay. I will just say that in many respects, it's Honor's fault they get reconciled. Okay. And I'll just leave it at that at this point, except to say that there's a whole huge amount of support work that has to be done to get this. I think the very first line in the story is something in the lines of, "Mother, you really don't want to go here with this jock warning his mom to do not have this conversation with Allison. It won't end well." And her mom's saying, "Nonsense, it's my job." And I'm like, I will guarantee you any number of mothers and daughters, fathers and sons reading those first 2 sentences are like, "Oh my God, I know where this is going."
Weber,
gotta hear what Jane's
Yes.
got to say.
Weber,
Yes, ma'am.
your mother's first name is?
Alice.
Well, exactly.
Well, if you'll
Exactly.
notice, what is the name of the heroine in Path of the Fury?
Mhm.
Alicia.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, that name has cropped up a time or two.
Well,
along
I
the way.
think, I've known you since I had dark hair and you had hair.
Thank you, Jay.
And I think it's worth noting that when Weber got started on these books, he had been a business partner with his mother. And when I met him, he would refer to her as Alice, because since they had been business partners, as he said to me, we couldn't exactly go to meetings
With the client.
and say, "Mom." And when you guys all probably weren't hatched, or reading when the first Honorverse books came out. But when I moved to New Mexico nearly 30 years ago, they were just beginning to gain steam. And I ran into a person who will remain nameless because she would be embarrassed. But I went to her house and I saw on Basilisk Station on a table, and I was like, "Oh, you've read that?" And she said, "Oh, yes, it's great. And everybody's talking about, who is this David Weber? People figure it's got to be a pen name for a woman because he does such great female characters." And I'm like, "Well, actually, I know him really well. He's actually like 6'4", and no, it's not a pen name for a woman." But I think this is it's interesting because Joelle talked about her family background and how it fed into her stories. Jan talked about his story and how where he grew up fed into his stories. I think it's interesting to note that Weber's very positive relationship with a lot of strong-minded women in his life really is part of what makes his feminist Honorverse work, because it's genuine. It's from the heart. It's not from the head. So there.
Well, I think that I get asked a lot, okay, "Yo, you don't have 2 X chromosomes. How do you do this kind of thing here? How do you write these strong, convincing, capable women?" And
I hope you don't
tell-
answer like Jack Nicholson did in that movie.
No, I tell them I don't. I tell them that I write strong, competent, capable human beings who happen to be female. Okay. And I think that's got to be how you do it. And I don't know. I think that my three strengths as a writer, and I'm not trying to rank these in priority because the priority depends on what I'm doing at the moment. But one is world building. I love world building, and I try to think about the logical consequences of the things that I build in at the time I build them in, so that I don't suddenly find myself having to produce God weapon number 3 to solve a problem, out of left field or whatever, or that kind of thing. Okay, so that's one. My second strength, I think, is the fact that I can get inside characters' heads. And I try to think about, when I build the character, I try to think about what are these characters' attributes going to be. And for me, once I've built the character tells me how the character is going to react in a given set of circumstances. Okay, I don't have to structure the circumstances to get the reaction that I want. I structure the circumstances and then get the reaction I'm going to get, if you follow what I'm saying. And I think the third is probably that I do battle scenes better than a lot of people, that I can keep the multiple viewpoints in a battle in the air for the reader, unless, like in the ebooks, they drop out the extra lead between shifts of viewpoint, so that you don't know when you jump from one bridge to the other, kind of thing, which makes life a little complicated. But every successful writer has to have those capabilities in one blend or another. Okay. And the particular blend that I have them in produced the Honorverse. All right. There are people out there who I think are every bit as good a writer, as good a world builder as I am, who never had the series catch fire the way the Honorverse did. Okay, trust me, I am very well aware of that. And I think it's a mistake to try and over refine on how that happened for me or for anybody else. Okay, because you have to do what works for you as a writer. You can't say, how would David Weber tell this story? How would Jane tell this story? How would John or Joelle or Tom and Tim, how would they tell this story? You have to tell the story the way that works for you. And if it works for you, it will work for other people too. Now, how many people it will work for may vary, but that's who you have to be if you're going to succeed at this craft. And everybody who's in this anthology did exactly that. Okay. And for me, this first victory, I like the people involved in it, but to me, this micro story is just as important to me as any of the macro story where empires are clashing with one another in the books. Okay, I want it to be that way for the reader too. All right, because bottom line, despite what I said about Honor and her friends being the window into the Honorverse, okay, stories are like war. They're fought by human beings. If we don't care about the human beings, if we don't care about the characters involved, then we don't care about the story. And if the author doesn't care about the characters, the reader won't care about the characters. And so you have to be willing to invest in the characters that you're writing about on a level that when I read some passages aloud at cons, my voice breaks, despite the fact that I wrote it, because I care about the characters in that passage. Okay, and I know what I did to them. I know what they're dealing with here. And if you can't, as a writer, if you can't do that for yourself, you can never do it for the reader. And I think that's, to me, that's a core strand of all of the stories in this anthology. And that's one reason why the title is What Price Victory? Because everybody involved here is paying a price to achieve the victory, or in Jin Sohn's case, not achieve the victory. That is key to what makes us care about characters. Okay, I mean, and that's wandered truly and far afield from First Victory, in some ways, I guess. But it's one reason why I'm so satisfied with this anthology at the end of the day. I just think it works on a lot of levels.
I definitely agree with that. Now, folks can get the e-arc now, I believe, at the Baen website. You can also, the book comes out on February 7th. So definitely check that out.
Time for Valentine's Day.
Good
That's
thinking.
right.
Yes.
That's right.
If you're trying to figure out what to give that man in your life, or the woman who likes science fiction, this is a great book.
Yeah, well,
Definitely.
Sharon's, you know what Sharon's getting for
Lasts
Valentine's
longer
Day?
than roses.
Huh? She's getting a CRV hybrid. That's what she's getting for Valentine's Day. Now, I told her it's also her anniversary present, so she better, but I was like, oh my God, yes. But anyway, yes, we are coming out just in time about, and it'll cost a lot less than a CRV hybrid. So.
All right. Any final words?
I think other people should have final words. I've had a lot of words.
My final words were the Valentine's Day gift suggestion.
Good move.
I would like to recommend to everyone to please read Joelle Presby's first novel, The Bar Snake Launcher. It's great. It brings to it a lot of the things that we've been talking about valuing today, which is really well realized characters, really well, and great from the point of view of me who loves to write from the alien point of view. Even though all of her characters are humans and all of them live on a recognizable near future Earth, she so brilliantly captures what it is to be from different cultures, and how there are some wonderful people in this book, all of whom run in circles, not to crash into what their perception is of what another culture expects of them, which is just phenomenal. So I really want to say that Weber has known me long enough to know I don't say nice things if I don't mean them. And so if I'm babbling here about this book, you can take it as a strong recommendation that it's really, really, really fun and good and smart. And it also has, in the person of, do you say it as Uncle Benoit or Uncle Benoit?
Benoit.
Benoit.
French
one of the singularly most despicable villains you'll have the pleasure of meeting. So that's my final word. Also, I'd like to say that Deception on Griffin, the story in my story in this anthology, is actually proving to be a very important turning point in Stephanie's point of view of herself and the person she is. So as I've been writing the follow-up for it in the next, as yet untitled Star Kingdom book, I've been very interested to see this short story written a long time ago is having all sorts of really interesting ripple effects. So I'm pretty excited. Thank you.
What'd she say?
Tom?
What'd she say?
I've just really enjoyed working with everybody here. Some of you more than others, but it's been a pleasure, and I really enjoy seeing all of the different nuances that everybody's bringing to pieces of the Honorverse. The way Jane brings this feeling of the frontier that we haven't really captured well. But when we're looking at Manticore back in these days, Manticore has maybe 1.5 million people across the entire system. when she's writing these books. I mean, it was devastated, and it wasn't very big to begin with. And it's growing rapidly, and so just capturing that feeling, and to see how Joelle just sort of perfectly builds out the way Grayson works, and she and I have had many conversations about that, and I've added many bits to the various tech Bibles about how things fit together, because she's thought about this so well, and the way Jan is building out this Legion Confederacy, and I love this because it's, I keep a lot of the lore of the Honorverse, and I try to keep everything together, and having all of these insights and all these extra pieces is wonderful for me, because it builds out, and I can take things from there and kind of spin off on them, and help keep building and keep supporting where I can.
And what you do, Tom, it's incredibly important and useful to all of us who are putting the stories together, because like I said, I honestly think, all due modesty, I honestly think that the Honorverse has done a much better job of maintaining continuity and consistency through its span than the vast majority of science fiction universes, even that are much smaller in terms of total word count and so forth. And a very large amount of the credit for that goes to Tom and Bu9.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just, when I realized that I could say, okay, guys, you guys are going to do this, and Tom and I will exchange emails about, okay, when did we say that we were going to introduce this, and that kind of thing. It's an incredible resource for everybody who's ever been involved in an Honorverse collaboration or one of these anthologies, even if they have not actually collaborated on novels with me. And I think I've done a lot of collaborations, okay? And I think I'm comfortable doing it, okay? But I think a lot of it depends on who your collaboration partners are. And it also depends on the working model that you have for doing them. And Tom is an incredibly integral part of the working model for all the Honorverse collaborations. And his name really should have been on the cover of the first Travis novel. But I think the marketing consideration was, well, we're already throwing two authors at them, kind of thing. But he was there from the get-go. And Tim and I were so happy when we could get him on the cover too, although I was suddenly outnumbered by people with three-letter first names beginning with T. I was just, yeah. But it's the Honorverse has been a fun ride, obviously, for me in a lot of ways. And these folks that I'm sharing the screen with right now are among the reasons that that's been true.
Jan, last word.
Well, I would just reiterate what everyone else has said. It's been a wonderful experience, and I really enjoyed working with all of you, and to build Celestia and to have my little adventure with Eve Chandler, which has been a much bigger fun than I expected ever writing something, and I enjoy writing. I've been doing that for decades.
Now you're going to have to do a sequel.
I'll be happy for it.
I'm sure the audience will be happy to read it too, as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I told David, I would be happy to have go back to Eve Chandler and throw something else at her in Celestia.
Well, people have been pushing me for a novel dealing with Sarnow and what's going on over there, and we got Bu9 right here. Okay, I'm just saying it could happen. It could happen.
Definitely could, and I would again say big thank you to Tom Pope, because without him the whole experience would be much more difficult, because he's the data bank of everything Honorverse related, and And I will also say that while I haven't read Joelle's book yet, I already bought it. So from the commercial perspective, and it's on my pile of books I intend to read fairly soon. And I also am happy that this is actually there will be a close second anthology where both me and Joelle are, because Joelle is a trooper and she agreed to write a story in my universe, in my alternative history books, which are only in Czech, and she didn't let that stop her. And we talked, and she learned that universe. And
he did translate it for me. I didn't learn Czech. I remember he translated it.
Yeah, every one of us was thinking, do you speak Czech?
I was setting you up, Joelle, to show you how really wonderful linguist you are, and you did this do this to me.
You blew it. You blew it. Yeah.
Okay, and she did a pretty good job, and the anthology should come out in the next few months, finally. And it's been a long time in the process, but so was this anthology. So yeah, I look forward to be there, and thank you for the ride.
Well, thank you, everyone. Make sure you pick up this, What Price Victory at Baen website, Amazon, anywhere else books are sold. The book comes out February 7th. And also pick up the Dabaré Snake Launcher, since, we might as well keep mentioning it on the call, which is also available where our books are sold.
Do we have a schedule for when the audio book on this one's likely to drop?
I do not know off the top of my head. I know
that Baen doesn't really control that it's the audiobook producers and the talent and the studio time that's available. But I was just wondering if we know, because I've got people asking me.
You said it's 6 to 9 months, Joelle?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I can't wait for this to hit the stores.
And now we bring you Timothy Zahn's Cobra. Earth's only hope was the Cobras. The colony worlds Adirondack and Silvern fell to the Troft forces almost without a struggle. Outnumbered and on the defensive, Earth made a desperate decision. It would attack the aliens not from space, but on the ground, with forces the Trofts did not even suspect. Thus were created the Cobras, a guerrilla force whose weapons were surgically implanted, invisible to the unsuspecting eye, yet undeniably deadly. But power brings temptation, and not all the Cobras could be trusted to fight for Earth alone. Johnny Moreau would learn the uses and abuses of his special abilities and what it truly meant to be a Cobra.
He woke to the impatient buzz of his alarm, and as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes, the answer popped into his mind. For a moment he lay still, his mind busy sorting out details and possibilities. Then, rolling out of bed, he snared his phone and got the operator. Kenneth MacDonald, he told it. The wait was unusually long. MacDonald must have still been asleep. Yes, hello, his voice finally came. It's Johnny, Ken. I know what Chalonor's up to. You do? MacDonald was suddenly alert. What? He's going to take over the Cursiage mines. Another long pause. Damn, MacDonald said at last. That has to be it. Over half of Aventine's rare earth elements alone come from there. All he'd have to do is use the mine's explosives cache to doomsday the shafts and entrances. Zhu would have to think long and hard about sending a massive force to evict him. And the longer Zhu hesitates, the weaker he looks, Johnny said. And the more likely some of Chalonor's neutral Cobras will see him as the probable winner and shift sides. If enough do that, Zhu will either have to capitulate or risk civil war. Yeah, damn. We've got to alert Capitalia. Get them to send the force up there before Chalonor makes his move. Right. You want to call them, or shall I? It'd be better if we were both on the line. Hang on. Let's see if I remember how to do this. There was a double click. Ariel, the operator said. The Governor General's office in Capitalia, MacDonald told it. I'm sorry, but I am unable to complete the call. Johnny blinked. Why not? I'm sorry, but I am unable to complete the call. Do you suppose the satellite's out of whack? Johnny suggested hopefully. Not likely, MacDonald growled. Operator, Syndic Powell Stewart's office in Rankin. I'm sorry, but I am unable to complete the call. And Rankin wasn't far enough away to require the communication satellite. So much for coincidence, Johnny said, feeling a knot forming in his stomach. How did Challenor get to the phone computer so fast? He could have done this any time in the past few days, MacDonald grunted. I doubt if anyone's needed to talk to Capitalia or Rankin lately. Certainly not since the courier ship left. Maybe that's why he sent Almo Pyre with notes instead of calling us from Thanksgiving, Johnny suggested, suddenly remembering. Maybe all out-of-town contact's been halted. Maybe. Listen, I don't like using this phone all of a sudden. Let's meet at Chris's shop in, say, half an hour. Right, half an hour. Johnny clicked off the phone, and for a moment he stared at the little box, wondering if anyone had been eavesdropping on the conversation. Unlikely, but if Challenor could fix the computer to block out-of-town calls, why not also set up something to monitor all in-town ones? Jumping out of bed, he began pulling on his clothes. One of Ariel's 2 fully qualified electronics technicians, Chris shared a 2-floor combination office, shop, storeroom near the roughly circular area in the center of town, which was known, presumably for historical reasons, as the Square. Johnny got there early and waited nervously outside until Chris and MacDonald arrived with the keys. Let's get inside, MacDonald urged, glancing around at the handful of other people that had appeared on the streets as the village began its preparations for the new day. Challenor may have hired a spy or 2 in town. Inside, Chris turned on some lights and sank into her workbench chair, yawning prodigiously. Okay, we're here, she said. Now, would you care to explain what we needed me to do here on 5 hours sleep and 10 minutes notice? We're cut off from both Rankin and Capitalia, MacDonald told her. Challenor's apparently jinxed the phone computer. He went on to describe Johnny's idea about the Kerseyage mines and their attempt to alert the authorities. Besides the water route up the Chalk River, the only land routes to the mines are the roads from Thanksgiving and Weald, he explained. Challenor is in position to block both of them, and if he can control the river here at Ariel, the Governor-General won't have any way to move in forces or equipment except by air car. Damn him, Chris muttered, her eyes wide awake now and flashing sparks. If he's fouled up all the long-distance circuits, it'll probably take a week to repair the damage. Well, that answers my first question, MacDonald said grimly. Next question. Can you build a transmitter of any kind here that can bypass the operator entirely and run a signal to Capitalia via the satellite? In theory, sure. In practice, she shrugged. I haven't built a high-frequency focused beam transmitter since my first year at school. It would take at least 2 or 3 days' work, even assuming I've got all the necessary equipment. Can you use some of your spare telephone modules, Johnny suggested. That should at least save you some assembly time. Provided I don't overlap one of the regular frequencies and trigger a squelch reaction from the phone computer, yes. She nodded. Readjusting built-in freak settings may take just as long as building from scratch, but it's worth a try. Good. Get to work. MacDonald turned to Johnny. Even if Challenor didn't set up a flag to let him know when anyone tries to call Capitalia, we should assume he'll be moving against us soon. We'll need to alert Mayor Tyler and organize whatever we can in the way of resistance. Which is basically you and me, Johnny said. Plus those half-dozen pellet guns Chris mentioned last night. He saw Johnny's expression and shrugged uncomfortably. I know, living clay pigeons, but you know as well as I do that our nanocomputers react more slowly when faced with 2 or more simultaneous threats. It might just give us the edge we'll need. Maybe. All the ghosts of Adirondack were rising behind Johnny's eyes. Civilians getting killed in crossfires. What would we be doing? Trying to guard the road from Thanksgiving? MacDonald shook his head. There's no way we can keep them out. They can abandon the road whenever they please if they don't mind having to kill a spine leopard or 2 on the way into town and don't need to bring in any heavy equipment. No, the best we can hope for is to hold this building until Chris can finish a transmitter that'll bring help from Capitalia. Maybe we should try the innocent approach too, Chris suggested, looking up from the book of circuit diagrams she had been paging through. As long as they haven't actually invaded yet, why don't we have someone, Dad for instance, try to drive through Thanksgiving to Sangral and call Capitalia from there? I doubt if Challenor's letting any traffic travel east from here, MacDonald said, but it's worth a try. You think your dad would be willing? Sure. She reached for her phone, hesitated. Maybe I'd better just ask him to come over and then explain things once he gets here. Challenor may have put a monitor in the system. The call took half a minute. Eldjarn asked no questions and said he'd be there right away. As Chris broke the connection, MacDonald started for the door. I'm going to find the mayor, he said over his shoulder. Johnny, you stay here, just in case. I'll be back as soon as I can.
That was another installment in Timothy Zahn's Cobra, and that's it for the podcast. Thanks as always to Audible.com and podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz. Praise, thanks, and gratitude to David Weber, Jane Lindskold, Joelle Presby, Jan Kotek, and Thomas Pope. And good night, Tony Daniel, wherever you are. This is David F. Shirod coming to you from a soundproof bunker somewhere deep in the heart of Texas. Join us here next week at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.